Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being with us here today at Pass and Stow outside Citizens Bank Park. And we are here, obviously, to introduce our new manager, Joe Girardi, and at the same time welcome Joe's family into our Phillies family, his wife Kim, his son Dante, and his daughters Lena and Serena. Lena, I hear you're a big basketball fan. You got a pretty good team playing across the street. That's great. And obviously joining Joe at the front is General Manager Matt Klentak. And Matt will begin with your remarks.
Thanks, Scott. I'll keep it pretty brief to start here, but I figured I would begin by just kind of walking through the last couple of weeks since I last saw you guys and just kind of filling you in on how we got here. Flying back from California about 2 weeks ago, John, Andy, and I spent a lot of time together just talking about what we were looking for in the next manager of the Phillies, and we went through a variety of attributes that we thought were going to be really important. And we really came to the conclusion that one of the most important things was going to be to find somebody that had prior major league managerial experience. So when we touched down in Philly and began the search process, that was kind of where we started. And we were open-minded that if we didn't find what we were looking for, that we could pivot. But that was going to be a key for us. Through our process of searching for candidates and talking to various people throughout the game, it brought us to 3 candidates, which is, I think you all know who those 3 were, and those are the 3 that we focused on during the interview process. All 3 of those guys were incredible baseball guys, and I'm really pleased with the way the interview process went. But really, at the end of the day, one of those guys really stood out, and that was Joe Girardi. I think our press release covered a lot of this, and I'm sure you already knew a lot of it, but having had 10 years in a big market in New York like Joe did, with a World Series and 6 playoff appearances, his resume really speaks for itself. But beyond that, I can tell you that when we talk to people about Joe, people that he's known in his career, people that he's worked with, the players that have played for him, to a man or to a person, every one of them would begin that conversation talking about what a good person Joe is. And then at the end of that conversation, they would conclude with, and don't forget, he's an incredible person. And I think when you're betting on people, when you're making a hire like this, it's a pretty good move to bet on people, bet on a quality individual. And I think we are really getting one of the best. So in a second, I'm going to put the jersey on him, and we're going to hear from him. But please join me in welcoming Joe Girardi to the Phillies. Congratulations.
By the way, I'm much more comfortable in this attire than that other attire.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So why do it from here?
Yeah.
Or should I do it from here? For me, first I'd like to thank the Middleton family and the Buck family for giving me this opportunity in this great city. I'm well aware of the passion for the game of baseball here, and I've lived it as a player and as a manager, and I am truly excited to be here. I'd like to thank Matt for giving me this opportunity. This is a special place. And, I started to look for signs where I might end up because I really wanted to manage again. And I started going through all these things, and I got calls from people, and it started triggering all these things that I thought about. I used to watch Larry Bowa. I grew up near Chicago when he was the Cubs shortstop in 1984, and obviously cheered for him a lot, him and Sarge, Gary Matthews. And then I fast forward to 1986. My lovely wife and I were just starting to date, and I went and watched the Phillies play the Cubs at Wrigley Field. And she got a home run ball hit by a Philly player, and we were in the bleachers, and it was before it was cool to sit in the bleachers, and someone else went to get the ball, and she stepped out his hand, reached and grabbed the ball, and I said, "Babe," and she's like, "Well, I don't know how many more chances I'm going to get a big league baseball." Well, you've had a lot over the years as we've been together, married almost 30 years here. And they've been so supportive. My wife, my kids, they've been through it all. They've been through winter ball and everything I've done. I think about other ties. In 1989, opening day, Chicago Cubs are playing the Phillies. I'm a Cub player. My first hit is off of Floyd Yeomans. The first guy I throw out is Bobby Dernier. And it just continued and continued. Jim Fregosi, I asked him about Raul Ibanez, and he told me, be patient. Older guys take a little bit longer in spring training. I did camps in St. Martin. My wife and I did camps with Vuk, John Vukovic, who was a dear friend of ours, and Gary Matthews was there as well. So I think about, okay, what's going to happen in my life? What's next? And I think, man, I got all these Philly ties. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be here, because I feel like this is part of who I am. My first road trip as a big league player was to Philadelphia. Stayed in the DoubleTree, which is still there. So it's pretty amazing, and I'm just very thankful and very excited about this opportunity. And I know the importance of winning here. And this is what we all want to accomplish. We want to win here. I had a chance to play against a great team in Charlie Manuel in 2009, and it was a great place to come watch a game. And I got to tell you, the passionate fans of the Phillies were great. It was not easy fans to play against, and I want it to be that way for many years to come.
Thank you, Joe. Before we get to your questions, I'd also like to introduce a couple of other folks in the room. Someone that Joe just mentioned, Larry Boa, Phillies great, is with us. Hi, Larry. And also Phillies first baseman Rhys Hoskins and his fiancée, Jamie, are with us. So great to see you guys here.
Can I tell one other quick story?
Yes, of course, Joe.
So, I'm managing in 2006, and I'm with the Florida Marlins, and we're fighting like crazy. I mean, we were terrible in the beginning. We were 11-31. We got back to 500. We're fighting for a playoff spot, and my son is 5 years old, and he loves this big slugger on the Philadelphia Phillies. And his name is Ryan Howard, right? And he says, Dad, do you think you could get his autograph for me? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I think so. I send the ball over to the clubby, right? And Ryan Howard, I think at this point, it's the last series, probably had like 13 home runs against us in like 16 games. Absolutely was killing us. So I text, and the first game that we played in that series, I think I walked him like 2 or 3 times. I said, not facing this guy anymore. So I sent the ball and asked the clubby to ask him, ask Ryan if he'll sign that to my son Dante. So he sent the ball over, and he says, I will sign the ball if you stop walking me. Pretty clever. I sent the ball back over, and I said, I will stop walking you if you stop hitting home runs against them. I eventually got the baseball. So, Ryan, thank you.
We do have a microphone at either side of the room, so please raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll start with Rob Motti.
Joe, you were the overwhelming people's choice here in Philadelphia. How aware are you of your popularity in the city? What does that mean to you? And what made the Phillies so attractive over other teams that you interviewed with?
It means a lot to me that the fans are behind me and more important, what the organization did. And, that they believe in this club. And what's so attractive about this club, you got to understand, I grew up in the era of playing against the Phillies in the 90s when they were great. Guys like Darren Dalton and John Kruk, who ran me over in 1991 and broke my nose and visited me in the hospital as I was going through that. I'm well aware of the importance of winning in this town. I had a chance to play or to manage against the team in the 2000s that was great. And so you think about the 90s, they were great. The 2000s, they were great. And this team has a history of being successful. And I'm selfish. I want to win. And that's why I came here, because I think there's a great opportunity to win here, because you have dedicated ownership, you have a dedicated general manager and front office, you have dedicated fans that support this club that want the same thing.
Okay, we'll go to the other side of the room. Just try to mix and match. Oh, you have one already? Bob?
I'm on this side, Scott.
That's fine, Bob. Go ahead.
Joe, you've been described a lot of different ways as a manager, and just in the last few days, people have read a lot of things about what kind of manager you are. How would you describe yourself as a manager, and what do you want to bring to this clubhouse and to this team in terms of the way you do things?
I don't really like talking about myself. I think that's for other people to do. But I'm a manager who really cares. I care about people. And I understand the importance of baseball to so many different people that are involved in this, whether it's the ownership, whether it's the front office, whether it's the vendor that's working in the stands or the ticket taker or the security guy, whether it's the people that sit down every night at 7 o'clock and tune in to really is basically a soap opera. And I really started to learn the importance of us in someone's living room every night from my family. My mom was the youngest of 15, and a lot of her family were farmers, and they would look forward to every day being in the tractor and turning on the radio and listening to a game. And you understand how important you are to so many people's lives. And to me, I care. I care about everyone that's involved here. And I would say that I'm a manager that has the ability to adapt to the type of team that you have. You know, I mean, people will say, well, what's your style? Well, my style is the type of team that we put together. And I will look forward to adapting to that.
Megan?
10 years is a long time to spend, with one team. What was the biggest thing you took away from that experience that you feel like you can apply now to here in Philadelphia?
I think the importance of winning and how you deal with that on a daily basis with your players, your coaches, front office, everyone involved, the fans. I really grew up in a city, in a sense, as a manager, being in a place that we were expected to win every year. And those are heavy expectations, but I've learned to embrace that. I love that. I want fans to feel that too, because I think that pushes us places, and I think that I want to be around people that are passionate, and I had a chance to do that. There were passionate fans in New York. There are really passionate fans here, and that excites me.
Jim?
Joe, I want to ask you about young players and analytics. Both are relevant in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
They use analytics here, they're young players here. I'm sure you're aware at the end in New York, there were reports that you weren't connecting with some of the young guys. It's no secret. I was wondering how that criticism did it fit, or did it bother you? Was it accurate? And there was also reports that you pushed back on analytics. I mean, can you talk about that as well, and in terms of the truth or fiction of all that? And Matt, did those important topics concern you? And did you probe them in the interview process?
I think as a person, I'm always self-evaluating and things that I can do better. And nobody's perfect. And there's things that you're going to look back on and say, I maybe could have done that a little different. I could have done that, As far as working with young players, I love that. I went through it with the Marlins. I went through it with the Yankees as they went through a retooling process. And I felt that I was able to get the most out of those players. We were one game away from the World Series. So if there was a problem, it didn't show up in wins and losses. That's the best way. I mean, as far as analytics, you were around enough that I was made fun of as being Binder Joe. I do embrace it. It is important to me because numbers tell a story over time. They really do. I'm an analytical guy that has an engineering degree, that loves the math, and they can never give me too much information. I think it's a tool that we use to assess players in so many different ways. Number one, how you get the best out of them. Number two, physically, are they healthy? There's so many things. Number three, can you change certain things that will make a player more successful? So those things all intrigue me. Those things I'm excited about, because in reality, our job is to bring out the best in the players. And whatever tool we have to help us, I want it.
Yeah, and I'll take the second part of that. Certainly, as we went through the process and we started to do our vetting, Jimmy, we asked a lot of different questions, but that being one of them, because we want to make sure we understand if we bring Joe aboard, what kind of guy are we bringing aboard? And we talked to some of the front office people that he worked with there, some of the players that he worked with, some who were younger players, some who were more veteran players, some who had Joe early in Joe's Yankee time, and some who had him later. So we tried to cover all bases there. I came away with largely the conclusion that he just gave you, which is that he's going to be a great fit for us because he is obviously plenty smart enough to handle all that, and he embraces it. But he also has the track record of leading that he does, both as a player and as a manager, to understand the right times to push, the right times to back off, and how best to utilize it. So it was a big part of our vetting, but we came away being 100% convinced that he's the right guy to balance just what you brought up.
Tim?
Joe, in 2 years away from managing, how do you feel like you've improved?
I think it's always to take a step. It is good to take a step back because I think you see the game from different perspectives and you're able to learn under situations where you're not pressured to win every day. The difference in how people continue to evolve and change as young people. As you know, I'm around teenagers every day, right? And I'm around a wife that I've been married 30 years old. It's like a teenager. So I think I've learned a lot. You know, I coached 16 and 17-year-olds. You learn a lot how they communicate and how they go through things. I think it's also good to take a step back and to see the perspective from up high and how the game changes and the new tools that we are able to apply to evaluate players, but also to reevaluate the importance it is to the fans. Because sometimes when you're involved in it every day, you can kind of lose perspective and you're worried about your job on a day in and day out basis. And you don't always see it from the fans' perspective. And I think that was important that I got a chance to see that again.
Kristen?
Joe, you talk about being a manager who cares. When you look at the players in this clubhouse, what kind of culture do you want to cultivate for them?
A winning culture. But a culture where there's trust in each other, there's trust in everyone that's involved, from the coaching staff to the trainers to the front office to the R&D department to ownership, that there's a trust. Because relationships don't really flourish unless there's a trust. That there's accountability to the guy that's next to you, that he's doing his work and you need to do your work, and there's a responsibility to everyone involved. There's a responsibility to grow the game in the city of Philadelphia and overall in baseball, that you take that responsibility that, hey, you know what? I need to do this, this, and this to be prepared as a player, but to make this a better experience for the next group that's coming.
Matt?
For Matt, I think by the end of this managerial cycle, like 2/3 of the managers in baseball will be people who haven't managed a major league game upon being hired. Why was experience such an important trait for you? And that was something you obviously decided soon. It's kind of going against a trend, I guess, in the game right now.
Yeah, I think the best way I can answer that is to kind of trace back a few years. And I think sometimes where you are as an organization will dictate the type of leadership that you want. And I've said this at different press conferences along the way. First about Pete Mackanin, that going through the early stages of a rebuild when we knew things were going to be very lean, we needed time to grow our farm system and let some expiring contracts roll off. We really placed a strong emphasis on leadership, accountability, on just maintaining that presence and that professionalism throughout. And Pete and his staff were excellent at that. Again, we knew that they weren't going to win that many games in those years, but he was really good to bring his perspective and his experiences to that group. All the while, in those first couple years of the rebuild, we were doing a lot of work behind the scenes to grow this organization forward, and we had a long way to go, which many in this room will know. When it came time, when that young group of players at the end of 17, Reese being one of them, came up, started to show flashes that this team was ready to compete and grow at the major league level, that's when we thought it was time to make that push at the big league level. And that's when we opted to go with Cap, who was a first-time manager, as you know, to really help us push and catch up and make ground at the major league level. And I think we did. I think now that our team is where it is, and we've added, through free agency or through players coming through our system, where we've reached a place where it is time to win, and no questions asked, it is time to win right now. That lends itself to bringing in a guy who has done that, who has won in the toughest of markets, with the pressures, and has hoisted that World Series trophy over his head. And again, I think that's all what led us to Joe. But I think that is, by and large, why we place such a premium on the prior experience.
Mike.
Joe, after 10 years in New York, I mean, obviously that's about as intense a media market as you can get. And you're known as an intense person, an intense manager. How did you handle that? How did you feel like you handled that environment initially as a manager? And how did you feel like your handling of that, the externalness of dealing with the media every day, the image you want to project during a press conference and things like that? How did that change over time?
The first thing that I learned being in a managerial chair is how competitive your job is. I had no idea. And it was something that, as a manager, I was always honest. There were times I couldn't give people in the media everything that they wanted at that time because I didn't have all the information. And I was never one to, and I was always careful with my words because I always wanted the story to be what I was talking about, maybe not someone thinking that I was leading the story a different way. So as far as, you know, there's a couple ways to look at it. You know, a lot of people say that I'm extremely intense. Yeah, that might be right, but I'm focused. I'm focused on the job always at hand. I think there's something that you can do when the media is an outlet. You can send messages to your fans, sort of thing, that I think is important. But as far as handling them, I mean, maybe I didn't always make their life easy because I just didn't throw things out there. But I was extremely honest, and that's the way that I will be here. People who do their work and are on top of things and ask me questions, I'm going to tell you the story. That's the bottom line. And I look forward to working with this market because you know, again, I grew up playing against the Phillies, managing against the Phillies, and I understand how important it is here. And I'm not just going to give you things off a whim. I'm going to be extremely honest with you, and I don't play favorites. And I don't really do always, you know, as much storytelling as some other managers, but I'm going to tell you the truth all the time.
Brendan.
Joe.
Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Joe. How are you? The Yankees just made it official that Larry Rothschild won't be coming back for next year to the Yankees. What would you think of him as your pitching coach?
I thought he did a great job with the years. I think we were together either 7 or 8 years we were together. I thought he did a great job. I thought he did a great job there. I thought that, you know, the game has evolved a lot, and Larry continued to evolve with how the game has evolved. And obviously Matt and I have a couple positions that we need to fill, and we are going to talk about every name that is out there and get who we think the best person is for Philadelphia. Because, I mean, you start thinking about pitching coaches and hitting coaches, those are really two important positions. They handle as many players as anyone when you start talking about a coach. You know, you have an infield coach that might work with 5 or 6 guys, but a pitching coach is going to work with 12 initially, and then it's going to become hopefully not 25 to 30, but that's the way our game has went. And from a position player standpoint, it's the same. So obviously I have close ties to Larry, and we'll discuss everything.
Scott?
Joe, 2 weeks ago when we had a chance to talk to John Middleton, he referred to, you know, how far this organization's come in 4 years in terms of R&D and analytics. You touched on, you know, your fondness for analytics and the use of it. I was interested to know sort of what you feel like is the best way to sort of deliver that information from, you know, upstairs to down at the field level and present it so that the players can relate to it and use it.
Those are things that Matt and I have talked about, and we will continue to talk about it. And they have an R&D department that provides so much information that allows you to manage players better, to manage people better, to manage the game better. And there's a department here that is kind of in charge of helping disseminate the information. And it goes through coaches and it goes through players. And as far as there being a perfect way, I don't know if there is a perfect way. I think it's important to understand what players are looking for and what they understand, And the one thing that I've always felt is this is a game of reactions. It's not a game of acting, because if you act, things happen too fast, so you have to react. So players need as much information as they can handle that helps them perform their job to their best. And we'll continue to talk about ways to disseminate. I want to know everything, right? And I want my coaches to know everything and embrace it, and to be able to help the players. As far as who sits in on meetings, I'm open to that. Whatever, I haven't done it yet. So it's hard for me to tell exactly how it's going to happen, but I want it just to work to the greatest ability, and with all the information that we have, to be able to give it to the players how they understand it the best.
Todd?
Joe, in getting to know this Phillies roster, I'm sure you obviously studied up on them quite a bit, working at MLB Network in the past couple weeks. What does this team need to do in the offseason to add talent, and where do they need to add that talent to make the postseason in 2020?
Well, I think there's areas that, Matt and the staff is going to address. I mean, one of the things is bullpen needs to stay healthy, right? So when I broadcast a game, and I did maybe 3 or 4 Phillies games, when I broadcast a game, I watch every reliever to study the reliever. I watch the starter that I'm going to see that night for both teams. And so when Sir Anthony Dominguez comes in, or an Adam Morgan comes in, I know what they have. I know how they like to pitch. I know if he's a 4-pitch guy, he's a 2-pitch guy, what he does, his swing and miss pitches, what they hit on. So every time I did a Phillies game, I did one in May, maybe June, August, there was a whole different cast of characters. It's really hard to survive when your bullpen doesn't stay healthy. So I think, obviously, addressing that is really important. There's starters here that I believe that have a lot of ability, and it's our job to get the most out of them. Whoever the new pitching coach is and the new staff is part of my job is to get the most out of them. And it's to continue to improve. And the greatest thing that you can have is competition at all positions. Guys trying to take each other's job. And I look forward to spring training, because I think that's when you really get to see the whole organization, and you get to see that, and you get to preach that. Look, this young guy's coming to take your job. You better continue to improve and do your job. So because we've been interviewing a lot, we haven't had a whole lot of time to sit down and talk about, okay, this is what we're going to try to do. But obviously, Matt is well aware of the areas that need to be addressed here, and we will do it over the next coming weeks.
Just want to let everybody know that Joe is scheduled for an MLB Network interview on the field in just a few moments, so we have time for 2 more questions. Bob?
Joe, there was a lot made when Gabe was here about rules, and Gabe wasn't a real guy for a lot of rules. He ran a clubhouse. That's the way he wanted to run a clubhouse. Do you have rules? I think I read that when you went to the Marlins that you imposed a facial hair rule with the Marlins that the Yankees obviously have. What are your rules? And Matt, was that important to have more structure than Gabe had? I know you feel about Gabe, but was that an important thing when you were interviewing?
You want to answer first, and then I'll go over the...
Sure. I mean, yeah, we covered a lot of topics in the interviews. I don't even know if I mentioned this, but we have 25 different people met with Joe in his second round interview. So I think among the 25 or so of us, I think we covered just about all topics. But yeah, discipline, accountability, getting the most out of a team. I mean, these are things that you're going to look for in any manager. So those topics came up here. And again, what is helpful when you bring in somebody like Joe Girardi is that you don't have to ask him how he would do it. You can ask him how he did do it, and how you can look back at that and you can test that. You can ask other people about how he did those things. And, I said this earlier, but we came away extraordinarily impressed with the way he conducted himself in New York. He really connected with a lot of different people here and made the decision pretty easy for us.
So as far as a list of rules, when you hand out a list of rules in spring training in the season, some of them are front office rules too, which are really important. But I'm not going to really hand them a list of 25 rules and expect them to memorize them, because you know how players are. They get a piece of paper, and right? Because they're focused on what they have to do. So simple things, though. It's simple. You know, I don't think you have to give them a ton of rules. It's be on time, be prepared, be accountable to each other, be respectful of each other, love each other, trust each other, be respectful to the people that are around us that have to do their jobs. That means you, right? No competing music. Now, that's what I don't mind loud music. I actually like loud music. But I don't want to hear one band playing over here and one band playing over there, because that doesn't sound quite as good. Right? So, you know, there'll be rules about the training room, but it's as long as you're on time, you're prepared, you're accountable, and that you're focused on winning. Is there really anything else? Because you can encompass everything in those 4 rules. So I was a player, and we got memos, right? And I knew what happened to those memos a lot of times. So they will be reminded. They will be held accountable to the coaches. The coaches will do everything to make sure they're prepared and on time. And, you know, I mean, there are consequences for your actions. There are. I want you to play hard, you know, because I think sometimes, you know, I think there can be a lot made of players when the perception is they don't play hard. And I've had to sit down players and show them videotapes of themselves and show them what it looks like. And there are guys that go to post every day, like Reese, and he plays 160 out of 162 games. There's going to be days that he gets frustrated, just like you and I, when things don't go right, or the kids get us up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's frustration in our lives, and you make an out, and you miss a pitch, and you slam a bat down and don't run as hard as you should. It looks bad. The perception is bad. So to me, that's more about controlling your mind than a player not really playing hard or being lazy. It's being able to control your emotions in those moments when things don't go your way. Kind of like what we teach them, tantrums, right? They're just adult tantrums. And it's our job to help them not have those adult tantrums.
The always mild-mannered Jamie Apodi will have the last question.
I deal with tantrums all the time, as you know. Not my own. You just talked about your rules, and obviously that's going to be conveyed to your team. Have you talked to any of the players yet? And I'm sure you've thought about what you're going to say to them that first day of spring training or the first day you get them all together. And what is your message going to be to a team that, you know, struggled to play up to expectations last year and is hungry for winning just like this fan base is?
Yeah. As far as the players, I've probably talked to 20 to 22 of the players. You know, I even text a young man that was in Indonesia, right? I mean, players go all over the place at this time of the year because they're not really working out and they're getting ready to start working out. And I've spoken to all the coaches that are still here and bullpen catchers that are catching coaches as well. So I have spoken to a lot of different people. So to me, the message is clear in spring training. We need to do whatever it takes to win. We have to trust each other. We have to love each other. We have to be accountable to each other. We have to respect each other. And it's our job to do everything we can to win on a daily basis because there's a lot of people counting on us. But there's also a teammate, you know, there's a little boy and a little girl that go to the ballpark and are excited to see you do great things. So let's get it done.
That'll wrap up this part of the announcement. Joe, again, welcome. Thank you for your time here. Matt, thank you. Joe has to go out on the field for the MLB Network interview that we talked about. In the meantime, Larry Boa is available for questions. Also, Reese is back there, and we'll be glad to talk with any of you. And Steve Mendel, who is the representative for Joe, who's been with him for an awfully long time, is also available.
So one last story I want to tell before I go. My ties. Pete McCannon was my first manager in the minor leagues, right? And Pete was the guy that gave me the call that I was going to the big leagues when he was the field coordinator. And I asked him, are you kidding? Right? And he's like, yeah, you're going to the big leagues. Well, he sent me a text congratulating me. And if any of you are guilty of taking it, I want you to be able to tell him. He said, check for the change in the drawer, and he'd appreciate it if I sent it back.
Well, it's time for us to change things up for a moment. And also, we should let you know that Joe will be back after he does his interview on the field for one-on-ones. And in the meantime, we have refreshments outside here at Pass and Stowe, so you're certainly welcome to go outside in the meantime. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. And as I said, Joe will return after the interview on the field. Thank you, everybody.